My name's Jeff Brooks, and I'm a regional communicator with Duke Energy. Today we're going to show you the process of how we remove coal ash and sediment from the Dan River as part of our response to the spill that occurred on February 2nd at the Dan River Steam Station. The process begins with a technique called vacuum dredging. Vacuum dredging is different from mechanical dredging, which you may see uses scoops and moving material, in that vacuum dredging uses a vacuum to remove material from the top of a sediment deposit down to the river bottom. It's designed to be minimally invasive and provide maximum performance without impacting the environment around it. Once the material is removed with the vacuum dredge, it's transported onshore through a series of long pipes that bring it into a cleansing and processing system. That process begins with a machine called the Total Clean machine. The Total Clean machine uses gravity and friction and shaking to remove sediments and large materials from the water. That material will drop down through a series of screens, much like panning for stones or other materials in a river. The water is then separated and moved into a clarifier, where fine materials are allowed to settle out to the bottom of the tank. Once that's completed, the purified water on top can be returned to the river. Any water returned to the Dan River must meet rigorous Virginia water quality standards. Material that's taken out from the clarifier is then passed through a series of tanks that add a polymer to it to allow the material to hold together, to then be transported onto a belt press. The belt press's job is to squeeze out any remaining liquid that's in the material, providing dry sediment and coal ash that can then be stored in a lined container and returning any remaining water through the water cleansing process. The lined container, when it's filled, can then be sealed and transported to a lined landfill for long-term storage. That landfill features double lining technology as well as other controls to monitor and ensure the material is disposed of in an environmentally sensitive manner. The operation at Abreu Grogan Park here in Danville, Virginia is under the direction of the U.S. EPA as well as input from other state and federal agencies, working with Duke Energy to address the deposit removal in the river. We began work here on May 9th and expect to complete the work and return this park to the public sometime in July. Our crews work to ensure that all work is done safely and with a focus on the river and the environment around it. As we said early in this process, Duke Energy customers will not pay for our response associated with the event that occurred at the Dan River Steam Station. Duke Energy is committed to the Dan River for the long term. We're going to ensure that the work that we do today ensures that the Dan River is a resource that the citizens of this community can rely on and depend on for years to come.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Jabone from Duke Energy. For more than 100 years, we've been providing customers with reliable, affordable energy at the flip of a switch. I'm here at the Sutton plant in Wilmington, North Carolina. In the next few minutes, I'll talk about the coal ash produced from a plant like this, what we're doing to close ash basins, and the process for determining if closure costs will be included in customer rates. Since 1954, the Sutton coal plant produced electricity for our customers. In 2013, we shut it down and replaced it with this natural gas power plant. Duke Energy is modernizing our fleet, retiring older coal plants and replacing them with cleaner forms of generation. Closing ash basins is also part of the plan. For much of the 20th century, coal was inexpensive and plentiful. At one time, it powered much of the nation. When coal is burned, it produces ash similar to what you see when you use a charcoal grill or burn wood in a fireplace. For decades, utilities have safely stored ash in basins like this. There are more than 1,000 basins across America holding trillions of tons of ash. Today, we're working hard to safely and permanently close ash basins in a way that protects the environment. In fact, we've announced plans to begin moving coal ash at a number of sites, including this one, and we continue to develop site-specific plans for each of our facilities. An internal team of engineers, scientists, and other experts are leading the effort with help from an external board of national advisors. All plans will comply with state and federal regulations. Today, there are three main options for managing our coal ash. The first option is to safely reuse as much coal ash as possible. For example, at the Asheville, North Carolina airport, ash is being used under a new runway, where it is safely stored using a rigid synthetic liner. Mine reclamation projects offer another option, where coal ash is used as a structural fill so the land can be redeveloped. The second option is to remove the water from a basin, consolidate the ash, and install an engineered cap using a specially designed synthetic barrier. The cap prevents rainwater from getting into the basin, which in addition to other engineering measures, further protects groundwater. The third option is to dig the ash out of a basin and move it to a lined landfill on our property or at another location. These permitted landfills are lined and include numerous protective measures to meet regulatory standards and ensure the groundwater is safe. Every site is different, and that's why we need a variety of closure options. Good science and engineering will guide us as we determine the best methods that protect our communities and the environment. All options will include groundwater monitoring and other protective measures. Earlier, I mentioned costs and how managing coal ash and closing basins is part of our business operations. Duke Energy is a regulated utility, which means our rates are set by the state as part of a very public and comprehensive process. When customers receive their monthly bill, it includes the costs incurred to build, operate, and retire power plants, as well as safely manage byproducts like coal ash. At the right time, we'll ask regulators to consider whether basin closure costs become part of customer rates. On behalf of everyone at Duke Energy, we're committed to serving our customers and communities. We'll operate our systems safely and close ash basins in a way that continues to protect the environment.
Understand the soil type. I cannot immediately move 100 million tons of ash. It's not a response that makes any sense, doesn't make common sense. As much as I'd love to tell you there's a simple solution, it's one that requires study, and it's one that requires time to complete.
But environmentalists say studying is code for stalling, because this problem isn't new. Duke has been conducting tests around their ash ponds for decades. And 5 years ago, when state regulators demanded to see the data, they found something alarming. The coal ash ponds in all of Duke's 14 plants were either leaking toxic chemicals into rivers and streams or contaminating the groundwater.
Some of the readings that we have found are for elements like iron and manganese, which are naturally occurring.
But 9 of your plants have been found to have groundwater violations for contaminants including lead, sulfate, boron, chromium, thallium, selenium, and arsenic.
So we have had exceedances. And when I said iron and manganese, Leslie, I was talking about the majority of them. We have had instances of other readings as well.
Well, I'm citing your own monitoring statistics, which do say that there have been hazardous chemicals that have entered the groundwater or surface water at all 14 plants by your own admission.
And what we have recommended and will be moving forward with, and the state has recommended, is further assessments so that appropriate steps can be taken. So, Leslie,
Further assessments.
I know, I think it's important to understand this.
But even you have to throw your head back and say further assessments. But these results go back years. And to say we need to study more, you know, is a very frustrating thing to have to hear. And I'm not even a citizen of North Carolina.
We have very openly and transparently disclosed these results to work with the regulators to determine whether it really represents a risk.
Does Duke's coal ash today pose any health risk at all?
I believe our system is operating safely.
But local environmentalists showed us leaks from several of Duke's ash ponds, like this one at Cape Fear.
The stream is like this, leaking coal ash into the river 24 hours a day, 365 days a year.
After we asked state officials about this particular leak, lab tests were done showing notably elevated concentrations of sulfate, aluminum, iron, manganese, boron, and strontium. The state says the leak doesn't impact the overall health of the river, but is illegal, a violation of the Clean Water Act. Yet environmentalists like Frank Holloman say that over the years, the state never forced Duke to clean up its ash ponds under both Democratic and Republican administrations. How powerful is Duke Energy in the state of North Carolina?
It's the most powerful entity in the state of North Carolina. It spends millions of dollars on political contributions, and it has traditionally had a very close relationship with the state regulators.
Just this year, Governor McCrory cut it and staff of the specific department that inspects the ash ponds. The state legislature passed a law in August requiring Duke to clean up its plants, but only after the company had already volunteered to do that. Earlier, Holland tried to sue Duke. He was thwarted by the state, which stepped in and negotiated a settlement that allowed Duke, you guessed it, more time to study and imposed only a paltry fine. Tell everybody how much the fine was.
I don't have that list, but again,
It was $99,111, which
correct.
does not sound like a big fine.
it wasn't a big fine.
All this has made federal prosecutors suspicious. They impaneled a grand jury to investigate whether Duke or the regulators has done anything illegal to get the state to go easy on the company. Virtually every newspaper in the state of North Carolina came out with editorials claiming that Duke was lax and lawless when it came to the environment and acted like a bully with state regulators.
I recognize that. I disagree with that characterization. It's been a challenging time, a difficult time, lots of voices weighing in, certainly lots of scrutiny and criticism.
But you must take this to heart if there's so much of it, you know?
Of course we do. We take this very seriously, and we're using this as an opportunity to raise our standards even higher, to ensure that our operations are safe. It's our highest priority at Duke.
Some tough questions for the governor today about the Dan River spill, questions he refused to answer.
Reporters wanted to know what he and his team knew about problems with the coal ash pond. WRAL's Capitol Bureau Chief Laura Leslie is here now with a look at what happened next. Laura?
We just learned yesterday that federal prosecutors have launched a criminal probe into the coal ash spill that dumped 80,000 tons of toxic sludge into the Dan River. Now, investigators have issued subpoenas seeking communications between the owner of that coal ash pond, Duke Energy, and the McCrory administration. Duke Energy is Governor Pat McCrory's former longtime employer, as well as a major political contributor, and he still holds stock in that company. Now, the State Department of Environment and Natural Resources took action 3 times in the past year to override lawsuits against Duke by environmentalists who wanted to force the utility to clean up the coal ash. Well, at today's press conference about winter storm cleanup, the governor cut off reporters' questions about his relationship with Duke and whether it's a conflict of interest.
In my 14 years as mayor of Charlotte, in my 1 year as governor, I separate my job as governor, and I'm very proud of the job we've done as governor in that regards to any company in North Carolina. I didn't, excuse me, sir, but you have not been recognized.
We also learned this week that DENR made a mistake when it said pollution levels downstream from the spill were safe. They were not. Health officials say people should avoid contact with the ash. The state's Environmental Review Commission will hear testimony on the spill when it meets in Raleigh on Monday morning. We'll be there to cover it for you, Deb.
All right.